Hi everyone, it's your book coach Liisa Kovala here. Grab a cup of coffee and settle in for a discussion about all things writerly. I'm the author of Sister's Winter War and Surviving Studhof, my father's memories behind the death cave, and I'm an author accelerator, certified fiction, and memoir book coach. As a Finnish Canadian, I also love my coffee. In this podcast, we'll take a coffee break together to chat with authors, publishers, book coaches, marketers, agents, publicists, booksellers, and many others. Welcome to Women Writing. So happy you could join us for a coffee and a chat. In today's episode of Women Writing, we're having coffee with Heather Campbell, Festival Director for Wordstock Sudbury Literary Festival and publisher of Latitude 46 Publishing. Hi, Heather. How are you?
Hi, Lisa. I'm good.
So great to see you. So when we have coffee together, we're usually where? I would say
Beans.
books and beans. So shout out to Leanna and her staff who are always amazing. But today we're having our coffee break together. I have my, you'll know this word,
Oh,
Sissy
yes,
Mag.
you do.
Yes, for sure. So how are things going? It's been a busy, busy fall for you.
It's been like extremely busy fall. And I'm in cleanup mode at this point. So, for Latitude, it's book sales. So,
Christmas.
yeah, it's the season where publishers try to make the most money they do throughout the year, which really is fall season, but Christmas is the time. So,
For
yeah,
sure. Yeah. And you've had some great releases this fall and
yeah.
I see the great promotions happening with your authors. And if people don't know this, I'm one of your authors. So I have two books out with Latitude 46. So we go back. I want to say that Latitude is it going to be 10 years in 2025?
10 years, March 31st, 2025.
Amazing. It's so, what an incredible, you know,
Accomplishment.
milestone, to
Yeah.
reach 10 years and amazing authors. It's been quite the ride. So I have some things I want to ask you that, when we have coffee, we talk about lots of things, but today I want to, ask you about some of the publishing issues that I think some of the your listeners might be interested in. So one of the things I want to know is what brings you joy as a publisher?
Oh my gosh. And now the answer to that is why you keep doing it. Because publishing is not an easy industry to be in, especially as a smaller indie publisher. It's a tough go, so you really have to love what you do. And I think when like we're working on some manuscripts that have come in and we're reading them and then we have these conversations about the story and that's the fun part, I think. But I also like, coming up with a new book cover and just going, oh, that's so great, that's beautiful. So there's all kinds of, little moments there that keep me loving what I do. And I keep thinking, like, I don't want to do anything else. This is, I've wanted to do this all my life, and I finally figured out how. And so, yeah,
Yeah, that's amazing. And like the fact that you've been around for 10 years already, it's, testament to the fact that this press is doing really well and more people are aware of it, which is great.
yeah,
So my question about, well, somebody asked me this and I wasn't entirely sure how to answer it. So it was about independent publishers. So are you categorized as an independent publisher and what makes that the label?
right. Good question. Because that word independent is used quite a bit. You hear it with independent press, independent author. And so the bigger publishers, the multinational publishers, are those like Penguin, who are owned by a large company who might not just be doing publishing, and they have offices throughout the country. They have immense resources, to publish. I don't know how many books they publish a year, a lot.
Yeah, absolutely.
So as a small press, which is what I prefer to be called,
Right.
is I'm doing, 6 to 7 titles a year. A mid-sized publisher is doing 20 plus titles a year. So that gives you an idea of, how the size works because as you're publishing more, you have more money to publish more books, and um, your sales are going to be higher than somebody who's publishing less titles.
Yeah, and probably more staff as well on a bit in a bigger house.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that being said, you wear a lot of hats.
I
What
wear
are
a
the
lot of hats, but I also over the years have um uh I have a great team around me who work not just with me, and I like that.
right?
So I hire out one of our designers actually works at Dundurn, but does design work on the side. Um, I work with River Street Writing, Holly Godray, who is our publicist firm, and it's going to be a year in January that we've been working with them, and so they also represent other publishers, colleagues of ours, and their books. So I like it that way. There's you're not having to, well, I mean, I like it that way because I live in Sudbury and operate in Sudbury, and those people live elsewhere, and they're really good at what they do, and so I still get to have really great, talented um, team members.
Yeah, absolutely. And Holly is going to be on the podcast in a few weeks, so that'll be really great too. She's
Yeah,
lovely, and it's nice to see what River Street is doing for authors as well. It's been great. Yeah, for sure. So, and you also get interns as well, and that's I think it's fabulous for training folks to come up in the industry.
absolutely, and certainly we need if we want publishing in Canada overall to continue to thrive. You need to have young people who are interested in the industry and who are gaining the skills in order to, come into the industry and be able to function, as soon as they walk in the door, which is not easy.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
there's there's so
Steep
much
learning curve.
to, yeah, there's so much to publishing that
Mhm.
is not seen. So we take interns from the Sheridan program, which unfortunately has just been
Yes, we heard about
cut.
that.
Hopefully
That's
they
so
change
sad.
their mind. I don't know if they can, but
Yeah.
that's very sad.
Yeah, that's a real hit on
Yeah.
everybody, I think.
So I have one of those interns right now, and then in the spring I'll take two actually from Centennial College.
Mhm.
And that only opened up to us during COVID because otherwise students were mostly in the college and looking for internships in the city.
Yeah.
Um, and I just actually went to a roundtable with students from that program that are in the program right now and who will be looking for internships in the spring. And I met some people that were actually studying from BC.
Oh, okay.
So I think they've expanded their program to allow for online students where they likely didn't have before. So,
Amazing.
um, yeah, those students are really fantastic. And I bring in two at a time because it creates an opportunity for them to work together as well.
Yeah.
Because especially when you're working online, um, it's nice to have a bigger team to work with.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And make those
Yeah.
connections and bounce ideas off of each other. And I think that's, sort of the misconception even for writers is that we all go away and work on our books by ourselves. And it's really not the case, right? There's a lot of people involved in that process, and there's a lot of connections people make with each other. And so I can see that happening at the publishing houses as well, that there's a lot of interactions to make sure these books come out into readers' hands. Yeah,
Yeah, and I
it's
and
such a
I
great
can share
opportunity for them.
how we do that.
Yeah, please.
Working in a virtual office space. I use Google Workspace, and so there's chat there, there's Google Meet there, there's the calendar, there's the shared drive, and so it's not like they go off and I don't hear from them for the rest of the day. We're chatting, we're sharing things, we're jumping on a Google Meet if it's better to just have that conversation. So it never feels like we're not kind of together. It's just we're in a virtual space.
Yeah, it's strangely one of the gifts I think of COVID is that we were able to figure out how to do the work from home and make it work and still feel like you belong to a team and can interact. And yet, the work gets done and it's amazing. There's so many more opportunities, right? Even as an author, I find there's so many webinars and book launches and various
Mhm.
things you can do from your home that, we would never have thought of doing before. So,
Well, just to add in terms of what goes on in the industry is that during COVID, I belong to several associations. So, Association of Canadian Publishers, which is for publishers, all different kinds of publishers across Canada. So when we all get together on a virtual call, which we've done recently, there was just short of 100 people
wow.
on the
Yeah,
line.
amazing.
I also belong to Ontario Book Publishers Organization, which is a regional, and most provinces have a regional association to belong to. Um, and the Literary Press Group of Canada, which is another national association, and that is just for literary publishers. So, somebody who's doing I don't know, science fiction or fantasy or something like that wouldn't necessarily be considered a literary press, and so they'd have their own association
Right.
for that.
That makes sense.
And all those groups were meeting virtually during COVID. And we do talk to each other a lot. We mentor each other. We share ideas with each other. We advocate together. We learn together. And so there's many of us that overlap in all of those organizations. And I've been sitting on the Ontario Book Publishers Organization board for, I'm going to say like 4 years now. And Literary Press Group has a distribution company that they set up, it could be 20 years ago.
Mm.
But they invited me to actually chair that group 5 years ago.
Yeah.
So I'm just finishing a 5-year term with
Wow.
them. So you'd get involved, and that's how I wanted to understand the industry from that inside perspective. And so I have dedicated my time to participating in that way. And um, the associations help you with some marketing efforts, um, accessing funding. Um, Yeah, so there's all kinds of different ways to help, move your um, press forward or to tackle situations that come along. I mean, there's a few presses that just didn't make it through COVID.
Yeah.
None of us want to see that happen. Um,
Yeah.
and so we all feel it. It's sort of like, I'd said to somebody recently, it's like, watching another soldier go down.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Because this is a cultural business. This is a cultural, I am a business. Not all presses are a business. Some of them are not for profit, which is basically what I should be,
Right.
but I chose to start it that way. So I didn't have to deal with a board,
Right.
basically. It
Sure.
would get too complicated.
Yeah.
So I could at some point, you know, um, hand this off to a board or something.
Right.
But I chose to start it as a business. But anyway, so during COVID, we all got together and just, talked about what was going on and ways to solve some of the problems, shipping or, whatever.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's something maybe people don't understand that, like, yes, it's a business, but it's like I keep equating it to writers, but it's not a competitive sport, right? Like
Mhm.
if other presses do well, you do well. Like it's you want everyone to be doing well and support one another and keep growing instead of seeing them drop off one at a time, right? Because that's the landscape that we just don't want to enter. Um,
Mhm.
and so that being said, what is the current state of the publishing industry in Canada? Should we be optimistic? Should we be a little concerned?
Well, we should be concerned because, and I just, spent, I don't know, 4 hours last week or the week before with all the publishers um, across Canada because the support that we get from the federal government in particular has really been reduced. And particularly the books that I do, excuse me, which is literary, contribute to the literature and the expression of Canadian voices in Canada. And that's important.
It is.
That's why I'm doing it. I mean, if I wanted to go and do horror books or something, it would be different.
Mhm.
But I chose to do literary work that is an expression of particularly Northern Ontario at this point. Um, that's poetry, that's drama, that's um, stories that reflect our lives and, how we see the past and how we see the future. So it is important. Otherwise, you're just going to read
Right.
US books.
Yeah.
And if that's what you want, fine. But I think there's enough Canadians here that want to read from Canadians.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think what we know is that the world wants to read Canadians too. And,
Absolutely.
we read authors from all over the world, not thinking twice about the fact that, you know, in their own hometown, everyone's a local author, right? Wherever they're from. I was in Montreal and I was in a bookstore and there was the local author section. And guess who was up there? Leonard Cohen. I'm like, of course he's a local author, but I never ever thought of him like that, right?
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
But yeah, I think yeah, representing Canadian voices to Canadians, but also to the world. It's an important thing that we're represented. It's not all. I mean, we love our American friends, but
And just, to add to that, the difference between, um, say, self-publishing and having a publisher who is essentially your agent, um, and you could still have an agent as well,
right,
is that there's a whole international book fair sector to publishing. And so I did have the opportunity to go to the London Book Fair last year
right, yeah,
and introduce me to, what that looks like, what happens in that space. And the government certainly helps us to export our work out there. And so
right.
that's a whole other
So
aspect of
for people
publishing.
who don't know about that book fair, can you kind of give us a little rundown on what that looks like?
Oh my God, it's huge.
Huge.
And London is actually not that big. So there's sort of the standard ones that is Frankfurt. And so that's very large. And I haven't been to Frankfurt yet. It's been on my to-do list for some time. It's just that it happens in the middle of October, which is just before Wordstock. So it's
Yes,
never a
huge.
good time for me. Even though my son Mitchell now lives just outside of
Right.
Frankfurt,
It
I
would be
still have not
perfect.
gotten there. Um, there's Guadalajara just happened this month. Um, Beijing, Bologna. Um, those are the ones I know off the top of my head. And so when I went to London, everybody said, just go and just see what happens. Don't try and make anything happen. Don't try to sell. Don't try to buy. Just go and see.
Right.
And, people that go every year were saying, like, there's not a lot of places to sit down, wear good shoes, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So, Canada will have a stand in there. And what you're basically doing, and most authors don't want to know this, but
But the
the
reality.
book, well, I mean, it's you want your book to be out there, right? But it becomes a commodity.
Yes.
And so people are there to, buy and sell a book that is potentially going to make some money for them.
Mm,
That's the other side of
that sounds
publishing is yes, there's the making of the book and putting that book out there and people reading it and loving it. There's also the other side of, well, we can't do that if we don't make enough money.
Right. Absolutely.
So the book fairs, the international book fairs are very much about that aspect of it. So, like the multinationals are there with very big booths. I wouldn't call it a pavilion, I'd say.
Yeah.
And then as our pavilion for Canada was I don't know how to space wise, 20 feet by 20 feet, it's
Right.
big enough space. You could get, I don't know, 10 tables in there.
Mm.
And so that's what most of it is. It's like these little cafes in these pavilions.
Yeah.
And then, we work with a rights agent who goes to all these fairs. And so our books get into his catalog and so then he tries to negotiate. So he showed me where he sits, and that is another part. And you have to have a badge to get in. Not anybody can get in.
Right.
And it is just, oh God, I don't know, like a warehouse space of tables with four chairs at it, and that's where they meet.
Right.
And so basically, it's just a place for everybody to network and meet. And
Right.
so what I did was, I got to see some of the Canadian publishers that I know, and the association directors were there. But I stopped in at the Ireland booth because I have a potential book that they might be interested in. I found a UK distributor that I'd like to negotiate with to see if they could, so you need to, um, somebody just bought a book from us from Ireland, and it took about 2 months to get there.
Right.
Now they only paid for the cheapest
Right.
shipping,
Fair.
so that's why it took that long. But that's the issue with selling physical books somewhere else. And so it's easy enough for us to sell books into the States because it just goes to a box, it goes across the border, and that's fine. But some people can have it print on demand in
Mm.
the States, and it makes it easier for the US booksellers to just order it and get it,
Right.
which we're doing as well. But to get across the ocean to Europe or anywhere else, um, it's better. One option is through Ingram and Amazon,
Right.
but you make no money.
Right.
Like there's after they take their fees off, there's nothing left.
That's right.
So it's just not worth it to do it that way.
Mm.
And so what the bigger multinationals have is they will have a printing press, printing company
Yeah.
in that country and a distribution system to go along with it. And so for a smaller press, we need to find that UK distributor
Yeah.
or the whatever country distributor
Yeah.
and send them our books,
Right.
and then they can easily
Manage that.
distribute.
Yeah. Oh, that makes a lot of sense. And
Anyways, I mean,
basically, no, but it's so interesting because it's not anything that I think the average person would have no idea about how the books get anywhere, right? Or even
well,
about
and
these events.
yeah, and the a lot of the Canadian children's publishers, in fact, get their books printed in China and have them,
Oh,
cargo shipped here
even to
because
Canada.
it's that much cheaper.
Wow. Amazing.
Now you need to be selling a lot of children's books
Right.
to do that. But,
Yeah.
like I often get people asking me about getting things printed, and it's like, I would love to be able to use somebody locally, but the cost, even I don't know why, but so we have uh, book publishers who that's all they do and can give us a much better price than somebody locally.
Wow, amazing. Yeah, well, I mean, and that's the thing, right? That's the whole business end of it that I think authors aren't necessarily aware of, but I think we need to be. I mean, that's part of our education too. Like at some point we have to understand that okay, there's you're passionate about writing your book and then the whole query process, that's, another topic and possibly getting a publisher. And then it becomes about that book is sort of put out into the world, and now the press and the author need to work towards selling that book, right? It becomes not just your passion project anymore. It's now part of the business. And so, what do you want authors to know about their role in that? Because it's a steep learning curve.
Yeah, and I think to me, there's writers who just want to write and maybe they self-publish your book and that's fine. I think that's, that option is there. People are willing to buy, then that's fine. But in terms of going to a publisher, when they read that manuscript, their thought is this publishable? How much work do we need to put in, which is going to cost us money to make it publishable? And then how much is it going to cost, to get the right cover, to distribute it? Am I going to get, we do a profit and loss worksheet with every book we take on to see what kind of profit there is. And oftentimes there isn't.
Right.
And so we may decide, like with poetry, that we just need to do this.
Right.
And we're going to try break even at least. But you can't do that forever because you won't be in business.
That's right. Yeah.
So I just think authors need to know the industry that they want to be a part of. What else is being published out there? Like, certainly if you pitch to a publisher, pitch to the publishers that actually you can have a partnership with. So I don't know. Don't pitch me children's picture books. I don't do
Right.
them. And it's pretty clear I don't do them.
Check the list, go online, see what's being published. And so many publishers will have on their list, like online, exactly what they do take and what they don't take. So it's surprising to me always when authors are pitching to publishers, then they don't publish that category. Like that's sort of a basic thing to check before you start querying. Yeah.
Yeah. I think because of self-publishing, I just think that a lot of people I don't know how to say it. Just sit down and create something and think that's enough.
Yeah. Right.
But
And
even
I'm seeing
as
that too. I'm seeing that as a book coach, that sometimes, they expect that the next level of work is going to be fairly quick and simple because they already
yeah.
have a draft. But actually, there's a lot more work that needs to go into it. And I always equate it to sort of, we don't know what we don't know. And so, especially if you're a
Mhm.
new author, you just don't know, how much better your book can be until you work through the process. And so, my thought is, um, actually, Gail Anderson Dargotz gave us this advice at a summer writing camp, which was don't pitch too early, right? Like I think people are so excited to start pitching and they think, oh, this is my book's done. But they haven't really spent time to make sure it was the best product they can make before they send it out. And so a book that maybe they'd spent more time on, you might look at quite differently than an earlier draft where you think, I don't think this isn't really worth it for us to go through that process. So that's kind
And
of my
and
2 cents on that.
no, I think you're absolutely right. I think that's bang on. And to think that you pitch something, and oftentimes interns are the ones that will kind of go through this slush pile. And um, you know, when I have my interns go through, it's does this meet the mandate? If not, gone.
Right.
And then secondly, it meets the mandate and it fits in with the kind of books that we publish. And then the next is the writing worthy of us to hand it off to an editor to read a full manuscript?
Right.
And you can tell pretty much in that first page, and you can tell is the synopsis written? Have they actually done the cover letter the way that we've asked them to do it?
Right.
That tells me that they're they know what's going on. They know what their responsibility is going to be alongside ours. As a small press, I like to meet with authors and make sure that I can actually work with that person because I'm that small.
Right.
It's not like you see in the movies where you submit it and then they just, produce a book, and sometimes you get mad because they produce something you didn't like, or
Right.
that's not reality.
That's right.
So, and especially with a small press, for me, it's like I'm going to have a relationship with you for a very long time because, if your book continues to be on our list, you are going to get a royalty statement or not, you know, then every year that's where your book lives.
Mhm.
So you want to have, some kind of a relationship with that author.
Yeah, absolutely. For sure. And so that's one of the things that I'm going to actually go to some of these Substack questions. I asked folks on Substack to let me know what questions they'd like to ask you, kind of go through some of those. And one of them, it just reminded me, um, oh, where is it? Oh, well, I'm going to come back to it. So I'm going to start with the Seaboard Review. They're asking if you're affected by the postal strike.
Absolutely.
Aren't we all? Christmas Eve.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean for our online store, which, we do enough sales there, and because of COVID, a lot of us have really started to push doing our own sales instead of going through the distributor, which is then going to a bookseller, bookstore. So I have a pile just over there
Right.
of packages that should go in the mail, but am I going to have to wait and then eventually send it by courier? So
Right.
we do use courier a good portion of the time, but when it's a one book kind of thing, then we Canada Post. And because I use Shopify on my store, I get a discount
Right.
um for the postal Canada Post
Yeah,
labels. So it's really impacting me.
for sure. Well, we're hoping that this gets all resolved and everyone's happy with the result of the strike. But for sure, I think it's affecting everyone, especially at this busy time of the year. The Seaboard Review also asked, they're book reviewers, is there anything we as book reviewers can do differently to help small publishers?
Um, yeah, I mean, the landscape for critical reviews has, I'd say, almost disappeared.
Mm,
And the um I mean, I know that the history of the Seaboard Review, um, and it was the Miramichi Reader before that. And I mean, Miramichi, I mean, I don't want to get all
right.
into
Yeah.
that situation, but
We'll be here another hour.
um, yeah, uh, that they created a huge I don't know what to call it. So that the reviews were starting to dwindle. You were not able to get somebody to review in the Toronto Star, or the Globe and Mail, or the Quill and Choir, or journals. It was just starting to really dissipate, and they came on the scene, and it was like we were all suddenly he must have just gotten like uh,
Inundated.
a hose of books coming their way, and so uh people were finding these online reviews and really, because that's what we need. We need attention to our books.
Right.
And people don't go looking at publishers.
Right.
They go looking for their friends or these uh, blogs or online spaces that they can find out, oh, should I read this book or not? So I think that's wonderful, and we really rely on it. I think that the and we just had this discussion with publishers about these online reviews, was that they cannot be considered, literary criticism.
Mhm.
And so to stay in the space that you are qualified to stay in.
Mhm.
And so if you're a reader, then you're reading it from that perspective. It's just, I can comment that I really like this book, or there's parts in it I wasn't so crazy about, that sort of thing. I think that's the extent of it. That doing a critical review without the skill set to do a critical review can be actually damaging
Right. Yeah,
more
it's a
than
whole other
helpful.
thing for sure.
And you want to be helpful. The bottom line is you want to be helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. Good. Yeah. And they also asked that Latitude 46 publishes Northern Ontario books and authors, but are they open to any and all Canadian literature writers?
Yeah, so our mandate is Northern Ontario stories or Northern Ontario authors. So Deep Sea Feline by David Hurlow. David lives in Toronto. Um, I think he's passed through Sudbury, but there is a scene in Algonquin Park. And although that does not really qualify as Northern Ontario, I loosened that description to bring David in and just to see how it would go. I am, starting to plan to open up an imprint for across Canada.
Nice.
And
That's
so
very exciting.
I'm hoping that happens in 2025. But it just, I have authors all over the place.
Hmm.
So it doesn't mean that it's only for Northern Ontario authors.
Yeah.
I have authors who live in Saskatoon, down south. The Seventh Shot, she had lived in Sudbury for a little bit of time, but she's spent most of her life down south.
Yeah.
So
So lots of connections. And a
yeah,
lot of them have some kind of little connection to the north, but it doesn't need to be
yes,
set in the north necessarily.
yeah.
So, well, that's exciting that you're thinking of a new imprint that will open things up for people too. So keep an eye on for that. Kate asks, what are some good questions a writer should ask to vet a small publisher? So I guess if they've queried and maybe received a yes from the publisher, and now they want to make sure it's all the right fit, or do you think that's something that should happen beforehand?
Yeah, it's kind of a interesting question. Go when you go to their website, the first thing I look for is who's their distributor. If they don't have a distributor, then they're really small. They're kind of what I would call an independent
Okay.
publishing house. And so they're either doing it through Amazon. Um, they're, I think that's really the only place you can distribute books is through Amazon, if you don't have a distributor. And just to know is that to get a distributor, you need to have a certain amount of sales.
Mhm.
So for us, we went through a really tiny little distributor in the first couple of years. And then as we had more titles and more sales, we were able to uh, put an application in with Ladisco.
Yeah.
And, we've been with them since. But there's other distributors and their question is, what is your sales volume? Because it's not worth it to them,
That's right.
to have, and Ladisco is based on a collective of publishers who might not otherwise get into a bigger distributor, but because they've come together, we have more sales.
Yeah. That's a
So that
big,
would be my first question
yeah, that's a
is
really big
how
thing.
how are they distributing?
Yeah. I would not have even thought to look for that. You know what I mean? Wouldn't be the first thing I would be thinking of, but it makes total sense. And just understanding the difference between independent and small presses and medium presses, and kind of knowing what your goals are and who you're pitching to and where your book falls in the right categories and the
So
list, the backlist that people have.
this is what Randall Perry, who's been working with me as my editor, we go through some of what comes in and people approach us, they'll phone and ask what our price is. And so
Oh,
clearly they don't understand the difference between traditional publishing and self-publishing.
right.
And so when you want to be published by a traditional publisher, then you are not paying for anything. Um, if they're established enough, then they might give you a small advance, or depending on how good you are as a writer, they give you a bigger advance. Um, so just knowing the difference between traditional publishing and um, self-publishing and I think they call it independent publishing when you pay to have something published.
I think there is hybrid publishing, so you can, purchase some services through the hybrid publisher. So I'm not sure if that still falls under independent. Like you say, that word is a little bit deceptive because independent publisher or independent authors could be, they're self-publishing completely. So yeah, I think we need a little bit of new language to distinguish all these things in this industry because it does get confusing.
Well, it's changed so much. I mean, even in the 10 years I've been here,
Yeah.
it's and now with AI and
Uh,
technology,
that's
yeah,
complicated. That's a whole other topic. I
yeah.
don't even know
I
where to go
mean,
with that.
I don't know if anybody asked, but why go to a traditional publisher? Um, and you do that because you do want somebody else to invest in producing that book,
Yeah.
right? If you want to pay for it yourself, then that's fine, go for it. Um, but you're I mean, I could, bring in the same editor you can, um, but I've got 10 years of experience of putting books out there.
Yeah.
And
And like you said earlier, you have all those connections in the industry, you have a network, you have sort of, where to send the books and where to get reviews and all the things that I think if we're and again, I know a lot of self-published authors and who are hustling and doing the thing. And if that's what you love to do, absolutely go and do it. But knowing that when you're with a traditional publisher, those are there's other things that you have access to that as a self-published person maybe not. So yeah, sort of I think this is the idea, right? Getting to understand the industry. And I know for me it's been a very slow. You've been excellent at educating me, and lots of other folks too, but it takes some time to just sit down and learn about these things that I mean, and what you're trying to do is write a book, but this needs to happen too at some point.
well, many people come to me with the finished product and they're very attached to it. They've spent a long time and worked hard to create this. And so um it's not how to compare it to something else, right? It's like you are, most of us don't go and seek investors,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
For a business of, but that's essentially what you're doing is you've got this product and it's like going to the Dragon's Den and saying,
Yeah.
I've got this product and I need somebody to invest in it to make it go out in the world as far and wide as it can go.
Right. Yeah.
And, you know, a publisher is like a dragon and they're going to say, okay, well, what's the potential sales on this? Okay, what kind of platform do you have as an author? Because in today's day, people want to check out the authors and maybe even, send messages back and forth. Um, uh, can you speak about the book? How do you feel about editing? Those are the questions that they would ask.
Yeah.
And then, say you've pitched to a couple of publishers, and that's where it becomes um, your choice to decide if you've got, three dragons there that say, oh, I want to invest in this. And so how much are they investing? Well, they could be investing between five and $10,000.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
that's a lot of money.
Yeah.
It's not 100,000, but you know. When you go to the bigger publisher, yeah, they are looking at, I mean, I heard a long time ago that, one of the multinationals would not even touch a manuscript unless it could bring in that, net sales of 100,000,
Wow.
right?
Right. Yeah.
That
Oh,
one
all
title,
volume.
because they can't function unless the books are making that much money.
Mm-hmm.
So scale that down to our size
Mm-hmm.
or medium size.
Yeah.
The medium sized publishers um, are pitched from agents more, um, than a smaller publisher. It's not to say that a smaller publisher wouldn't be approached by an agent. We have.
Mm.
Um, but the agent is going to negotiate a bigger advance because they need to get some money out of this,
Right. Yeah.
right? And the other thing to know is that when you do have an agent, all the royalties, you keep that relationship. Royalties funnel through the agent
Right.
instead of the directly to the author.
Right. Yeah. Another layer for sure. Um, and Lori wants to know, oh, this is very particular to your press. What kind of project or writer is a good fit for Latitude 46? You've kind of already answered that a little bit, but
Yeah. You're a good fit.
thanks, Heather.
Um, no, I don't know. I mean, just to meet the mandate, I think, and just want to work together.
Yeah, and I love the idea that you meet with the authors first and make sure they're a good fit for you, but that the authors feel comfortable and that you're a good fit for them, that you can create
Yeah.
that relationship, right? I think it's really important, especially when it's um, a small press that and you're working so closely together that the personalities that you can get along, right? Like we've been working together for 10 years essentially, almost.
Yeah,
And I think that's really important part of it, and that you can have those conversations, the fun ones and the hard ones and all the things,
exactly.
and
Because
have
they're
coffee
not,
together.
yeah. Because you do have to have hard conversations
Yeah,
sometimes.
yeah, absolutely, for sure. Okay, and then I do have, these are good questions from Marion. Um, what is the biggest challenge for publishers? And I think that might mean we've kind of addressed this a little bit in today's landscape. I think it's, but what do you think is one of the biggest challenges?
The biggest challenge for all of us right now is cash flow.
Yeah, yeah,
It's cash flow. It is
lack of funding.
lack of funding, but also, low sales, higher prices for shipping and for paper, for me, to me, it's that cash flow, but also finding the sweet spot to getting people's attention on our books and getting them to actually buy them.
Mm, yeah, absolutely. And she also asks, what's one thing you wish authors understood about publishing? That's a hard question.
I think um I think when an author and a publisher, especially with a small press, can just work together well from day one through the editing process to the planning to the, because we start marketing 8 months before. Um, I always talk about Rod Carley because, um, and I don't expect other authors to do this. Like he's invested his own money and, he retired and then he's just, really wants to do well with this book. He wants a writing career. He wants a big writing career. He doesn't want a
Right.
little writing career. He wants a big one.
Yeah.
And so, um, I think just you're on a team. It's
Mm,
like work with your team and contribute like a team member and it will do the best we can.
love that. Yeah, absolutely. Like any other business venture, anything else somebody might be investing in and spending, whether that's
Mhm.
time or money, right? That it requires um, effort from everybody to make that thing show up in the world in its best way. And that's what ultimately I think that's what we all want, right? Both the authors and the publishers. We just want the best for that book, and we wanted to see it flourish and for people to find it. And it's hard work to get it there, but everyone's on the same team, and I think that's really important to remember. I do want
So
to.
let's,
Oh, go ahead.
for an example though, with surviving Stuthoff, right?
Yeah.
So generally, we don't, publishers wouldn't take a self-published book
Yeah.
on because you've basically sold it to your first market.
Yes. So
Right?
if listeners don't know, I originally self-published that book in 2015, and I think I pitched it to you in the next summer, 2016, because you were just opening then, I think, or maybe it was
Mhm.
somewhere around that time. You were sort of a very new press, and I thought, okay, well, I'm going to send it to you and see what happens. And so, yes, I did actually do quite well as a self-published author,
Mhm.
and then I sent it to you, and
And so we decided that this was a really important, unique story and that it still had some legs on it. And so on the business side of it, I'm thinking, oh no, like this is schools, this is libraries across North America. No, this needs to be put out there in a way that people have access to it. And so, um, we have worked well together because we both believe in this story. You
Mhm.
believe in it from your reasons, and I believe in it for mine.
Yes,
And it's that power of us two believing in this story that it should go farther, but it should also last.
yes,
So while it's um, in our catalog and in our warehouse, it can always be sold.
yes,
So what are we, 8 years now that
yeah,
we've had it,
mhm,
right? And it continues to sell.
yeah,
And so we also were able to do the ebook and make it available that way. And
yes,
then we did the audiobook. And so when I had access to some funding to do audiobooks, I got to choose from my list, which at that point would have been about 40 books,
mhm,
that this was one that I thought was important to be available in audiobook.
yeah,
And so an audiobook, just FYI, costs generally around $5,000. So it's around the same price to produce a paperback as it is to do an audiobook. And the audiobook is, you're recording it, you have a narrator, you have a director, you saw in terms of, catching the language and all that kind of stuff. I mean, you should talk, I mean,
yeah,
I want more people to listen to that audiobook because
yeah.
it was so, I mean,
Oh, it's
when we were
incredible.
recording it, it was just like, oh my God, I'm getting chills.
Yeah. Well, I can say, so I think we can say that, so my son, who's an actor and he's studying at George Brown, just finishing his last year, and he was hired to be the narrator, which was so incredible. Okay, he has an incredible voice. I know him, Mama Bear, but he has this
Oh, he
incredible
does.
voice. He's really into the voiceover work. And so he was recording one day, and I came in, and I wasn't there every session, but I went in, and here is my son reading my words about his grandfather, my father, and like it brings you to tears.
It gives me chills even you just
I
saying
know. It was just this
that.
incredible, incredible moment because and to hear him like, and then of course I listened to the whole thing because we were picking out, there's some Finnish words and some German words, and so we were trying to get the pronunciation as close as we could. And so I was picking, but to hear his voice telling this story, and he wasn't, Kieran, when he was reading it, was not much older than my dad was when he was
Mhm.
in the concentration camp at 16. So Kieran's a little older now, but it just brings all of those things, that these things that happen in our family histories, that they carry on. That happened to my dad in 1944, 1945. And I, in some ways, family members still live with that. Like I think about it all the time. And so the fact that this story is out in the world in a way that other people can access it and learn from it, and be reminded of the things humans are capable of doing. And, both the negative and the positive, that, you can have hope and survive these situations and get through the worst of the worst. Well, you can tell I'm just really passionate about it. And I think, the fact that Kieran was the narrator, just, of course Mama's going to feel that way. I would have felt really moved by any narrator doing it. But
I know,
having
but that,
Kieran narrate it was just next level.
yeah, absolutely.
Amazing. Yeah. Well, that was awesome. So I do want to pivot just slightly, because you are also the festival director for Wordstock Literary Festival here in Sudbury in Northern Ontario,
Mm.
and you bring in the most amazing authors every year. And can you tell us just a little bit about that, what that entails and what that looks like, and why people should come to it from outside of Northern Ontario? I know it's a Northern Ontario festival, but everyone should be flocking to Wordstock, in my opinion.
Absolutely. And it's pretty rare that we have somebody that has attended, both guest or attendee, that hasn't had an amazing experience. And it's an experience.
It is.
And the reason why I started it was because I was missing that here. I've been in Sudbury not quite 30 years, but I love books. I love writing. I love everything literary, and we didn't have anything like that. And so, um, I was at a stage in my life where my kids were off to university, and it's like, yeah, I've got the time to do this. And so we just did our 11th year. It's pretty incredible. Um, and the thing about this festival that's a little bit different than other ones is that it is intimate.
Mm,
Um, our city is not as big as, Toronto or Hamilton or other places that have festivals. And it means that anybody who wants to talk to one of the authors will. Um, you can have a great conversation about whatever topic you're interested in with this author. In terms of programming, that's my favorite part, is to program, and it's a really kind of organic process that always delights me when it all happens, when it all comes together and happens, and it's just like, oh my gosh, that just turned out so good.
yeah.
Um, but I've been programming, I get feedback from people, and then I'm also out there, and I might hear about somebody, or I might catch somebody, and it's like, oh yeah, so for example, I did want to have Alicia Elliott up, for quite some time. And Annie, who's been working with us, was down at Gritlit and managed to see Alicia, and then asked her if she would come up.
Yeah.
And so that's sometimes how we get some of the authors.
Yeah.
And then Kim Fauner is always feeding me author names. And so I'll check them out and see what we can do together, how to put them together, or maybe they're on their own, or, and Rod Carley has suggested Heidi Reimer to me.
Mm-hmm.
And anybody that has a connection to the North is always intrigues me, especially when they're out there having a big writing life. And so Sarah Selecki and Heidi Reimer have these connections to Northern Ontario that I had no idea about. And they actually both do like writing workshops and stuff. So
Yeah, yeah. They work with writers for sure.
yeah,
Yeah. Sarah's Lucky Writing School, I want to say. Hope I got that right.
yeah,
For sure. Yeah, that's amazing. Well, and I think there's a little bit of a campaign happening right now, for folks if they want to support the literary festival. They can also
yes,
make donations. So, um, while you're getting your Christmas gifts, and put Wordstock Literary Festival on the list, and a little donation goes a long way to help the
yes,
festival
please
keep
do.
going. Mhm. Well,
One thing
Heather,
I just
go ahead.
wanted to, oh, I just wanted, because I do get a lot of questions about authors pitching to festivals.
Yes, yeah.
And um, even Latitude 46, I don't know if we've gotten into any festivals, maybe one or two.
Mm,
It's really difficult. And I know these festival directors, we meet just as much as the publishers do,
Yeah.
um, is again, it's who's going to draw that crowd in,
Right.
and to not be disappointed by not getting in is it's really difficult to program and to be able to include all the people that are out there writing.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And I think that's true for so many aspects of the writer life, whether it's, getting that, getting a publisher or an agent, or getting that interview or review or whatever it is. Just keep plugging away and just keep working at it. And, you're going to get a lot of no's, but you're also going to get a yes. And that's going to feel great. And then just keep working at it because it's really easy to, feel like, oh, this isn't working for me and I need to not do this, but it's kind of the long game, and you just keep writing, keep getting better at that, learn about the industry, learn about promotion. That's a whole other topic. And I think if you just are persistent and keep doing the things you love and learning, like at any age, you can start this process at, we've seen authors at 60 and 70 who have published their
Mm.
first book. It's never too late, but also keep at it because there's going to be yeses in your future. It just might not be right away. So yeah, that's my thoughts on
Yeah,
on
no,
that.
I
Keep
think you're
going.
right.
So Heather, I just want to thank you for taking some time out today and having a chat with me. And I'm sure we'll meet again at Books and Beans in person.
Absolutely. This has been fun.
And such a wealth of knowledge about the publishing industry and how supportive you are with your authors, and the fact that we have a press here in Northern Ontario. It's just amazing. It's great for readers. It's great for writers. And I love that our books are getting out into the world in bigger and bigger ways as well. And that's thanks to you, and also thanks to Wordstock Literary Festival, who does amazing work here in the North. So thanks, Heather. We'll chat again.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye. Thanks for taking time out of your schedule to have a coffee break with us at Women Writing. Don't forget to subscribe to Women Writing on Substack. If you like this episode, share it with someone who needs a writing break and a little inspiration. Happy writing. Thank you to Michael Jensen for his original music and editing, and to Mia Jensen for the logo design.